Hello, listeners, and welcome to Pop Screen, part of the Geek Show Podcast Network. We are the Geek Show's podcast dedicated to the good, the bad, and the befuddling of films, either starring, by, or about pop stars. No, the podcast covers such a broad range of musical and cinematic genres, from country and western to hip-hop, from documentaries to science fiction. I'm your host, Graham Williamson. I'm a filmmaker, and I also write criticism for the Geek Show and Horrified.com, the British horror website. I've been joined this week by...
Hello, I'm Mark Harrison. I'm a writer for Film Stories magazine, Fodzilla.co, and various other outlets, occasional quizmaster as well.
Yes, indeed. Yes, you do good quizzing.
I do indeed. Cheers. How are you doing, Graham?
Not bad. I'm particularly excited since this is the start of Pop Screen's first Oscar month. We are recording this before the nominations are announced, so this is maximum risk, but come on. What's the competition this year, if we're honest?
We might as well go all out. I can't believe that today's film has 12 nominations. But see how
Can't believe it's beat Titanic. Can't believe they're putting this thing forward for Best Animated Short.
I think it's got a good shot. Most of them don't watch any of the nominees, so yeah.
Yes, we don't often cover big up-to-the-minute cinema releases on this show, but when we do, it's probably because one of the Oscar frontrunners this year stars Tom Waits and literally all of Haim. It can only be Paul Thomas Anderson's latest film, Licorice Pizza, which we have both seen on a big screen, a massive screen. Well, it was biggish, I guess. And yeah, we should probably just talk a bit about Paul Thomas Anderson before we start, because there are other films he's done that qualify for Pop Screen. I would kind of like to do an episode on Inherent Vice with its amazing Joanna Newsom performance at some time. But I think we are probably alone in being the first White Guys Talk About Movies podcast that hasn't gone on at great length about Paul Thomas Anderson yet.
We're breaking new ground here, yeah. So for me, like, as far as I've seen all of Paul Thomas Anderson's films, caused a few gaps during lockdown. Yeah, like went back to I think Hard Eight was the last one that I hadn't seen, so that was nice to catch up on. For me, it's my main, like, I've kind of seen every one of them once, and it's a resolution to go back and revisit all of them this year, including Licorice Pizza. But for me, me and my partner, it's been watching Phantom Thread. That's the film I've revisited the most, because it just turned out to be an unexpectedly great date movie, because it is a really caustic romantic comedy, which I delight in. And it's one of them things we'll just quote back and forth with each other. So it's just one of those films that means a lot to us.
So long as you watch it after you've had dinner, right?
Yeah, sure. It's not a lot of turning around to each other going, "Are you a special agent sent here to ruin my evening and quite possibly my entire life?" No, it's mostly just sort of whispering sausages at each other and other breakfast order items. How about you and your relationship with Paul Thomas Anderson?
I love the guy. I still haven't seen Hard Eight. I must get around to that at some point. But I remember when I was first properly getting into movies, that was when there was all sorts of buzz about this young American guy who'd done Boogie Nights and he'd done Magnolia. And there was this real feel of, after you've done Magnolia, a film that is over 3 hours long and stars everyone, where do you go from there? And I remember that afterwards he was going around saying, I think probably the next thing I'm going to do would be like a 90-minute Adam Sandler comedy. And I was like, great joke, Paul. He's funny as well. And then he did that, and I've
Yeah.
followed him ever since. I know there are some people who think that the stuff he did in like immediately after There Will Be Blood is weaker than the rest of his canon. Those people, I think, are cowards. I don't respect them. I think The Master is my favorite thing that he's ever done because it is so sprawling and so tonally all over the place, and just it shows you that he gets great results from actors from doing the thing that you're supposed to not do with actors, which is just give them loads of leeway. Just let them do whatever shit they fancy, really.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, his Resident Evil films are a bit of a detour. But... Oh, hang on, I may have the wrong tab open here. I might be looking at the wrong Paul Anderson. But yeah, but it's a thing that I think comes to the fore, especially in Licorice Pizza. Is a hangout. It's a hangout movie.
Mm.
You know, and it's got a very close relation to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, isn't it? It's both of these American directors making movies sort of set in the time and place when they were growing up. But I think with this, it's a matter of like, you know, when you read about him talking about his screenwriting process and about his process of making films, he doesn't write to a specific ending. He just sort of lets it unfold organically. And there's so many ways that shouldn't work.
Yeah.
I've seen some people argue that there are scenes and bits in this that could be cut out, but it's like it's a film that is just it's a hangout film. I can't think of a better way to say it than that without sort of spoiling where I'm going to end up going with this. We've got a very on the nose comparison that we'll get to later on.
Okay, right. But yeah, it's like it is funny that I think people nowadays are very hung up on plot. I think it's a combination of like box set television and big like YouTube videos that analyze some blockbusters solely from a script writing perspective. And it's like I can see how you'd analyze a blockbuster from that perspective because they are going for like classical 3 acts, setup, payoff, nothing too weird storytelling. But I do watch these videos and I end up wondering if they think cinema is just radio, you know, if the writing is like the only thing that matters. And I do think that if you're making a film like this, which is, as you say, a hangout movie, it is meant to be about the looseness and possibilities of being young. Maybe having everything marry up and maybe having no loose ends is actually a bad way to get that emotion across.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say about this, as much as it is it seems like it's a meandering film, and
Mm,
when you're in it, before you get to the ending, it can feel episodic. And what I think Anderson does so well, though, is when you do get to the end and it feels earned, it feels like everything that's gone up to it has fed into where it gets to now. And this, you know, all those the screenwriting analysis YouTube videos never really go above the level of, you know, in quotes, lazy writing for something they personally didn't like. This is lazy writing, capital L, capital W. And
yes.
in this case, you come out of a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson's films, and this one I think is no exception. With where the ending really just pulls it all together.
Yeah.
It's and you know, with this one, you are watching two characters on a journey, if you like. You know, it's you can chart them. You know, if you want to, you know, go with the screenwriting, you know, the Bibles that these YouTube videos come to, you can absolutely project a 3 act structure onto Licorice Pizza. I can tell you what the act breaks would be
Yeah.
in this film once we get into more spoilery territory and stuff. But it's in there. It's more successful, I think, than other films of this type that they go, oh yeah, I'm making a hangout movie. I'm making like a Dazed and Confused, or I'm trying to do what Once Upon a Time in Hollywood did, and comes out a lot less successful. And I think it doesn't. I think he's just got a style that, you know, that's so lived in, so baked in his characters that you can watch
Mm.
these characters forever. Really, I could have happily watched this film for an hour longer. That said, I do think it's a better film for not being an hour longer.
Yeah, I think it's a brisk 2.25 hours, which in Paul Thomas Anderson's terms, well, that is best animated short, isn't it? I was right. But
Very
yeah,
animated, yes.
I sort of it's one of the things you said there about the structuring of it. I do think that there is a great deal of writerly craft in here, and it's not the way that there is writerly craft in all of his films because he's very good at writing memorable, character-appropriate dialogue. But when you look at something like the scene where Gary Valentine, the protagonist of the film, is taken away by the police, and he's like grabbed really forcefully and bundled into the back of the car, and there's these two terrifying LAPD cops who tell him he's going into prison for murder. And he gets there and they lead someone out to take a look at him, and the guy just goes, well, that's not him. And there are loads of people who would like pick that up as, as like an example of how baggy and how shapeless the film is. But when you look at that in context, Gary and Alana, his love interest, are very standoffish before that. And Alana thinks this kid is a total loser. He's going nowhere. He's not someone who she would like to hang out with. And seeing him treated that roughly, she actually finds herself, despite her best judgments, going down to the police station and being very, very worried for him. So it gets the two characters, the thing that the movie is, about. It moves their story on really an incredible amount, and the fact that he's done that in a really sort of offbeat, funny way is, to me, part of the charm. But I think everything is so mechanically about plot in some people's heads that there really were some people going, well, what happened to the murder? Who did the murder? And it's like, it's not even slightly relevant. It's not Knives Out. What are you on about?
Look, I've seen the film. These people, like, if the thing is, if it doesn't matter to the plot, then take it out. Why did I just watch Amy Adams go to Superman's grave to a whole Nick Cave song? That's what I'm asking. So, it's like, in terms of what passes for lazy writing, I'm not lending any credence to that. The police station scene, though, is the first, and it's down to the filmmaking as much as the plotting. It's one of many scenes in the film where the two of them are magnetically drawn to each other. You'll see, there'll be shots of them running across town. There's lots of running in this film. So much running. It's an exhausting film to watch in that regard. It's like, God, these kids are active. But they'll be, like, she'll be running from left to right, he'll be running from right to left. It's in opposite directions, but towards each other always throughout the film. It's nice of doing that. In terms of the writerly craft, there's, when we first see these two characters come together, it's his yearbook photo day, which is one of the just passing incident that Anderson saw years ago while passing a school, and thought, like, that was sort of an inspiration for the film. Like, the very first thing she does is hold a mirror up to him. Like, come on, you can't, like, it's very nicely done. It's not on the nose. It's like, that's how she's introduced to him, and it's what her character then does throughout the film.
Well, that's a visual thing, you see. If it's not something that would be in a radio play, it's not screenwriting, according to certain people. And I'm not going to spend like this whole podcast slagging off people whose tastes differ from mine, but it is interesting when you look at some of the areas in which the film has been controversial, particularly the scenes with John Michael Higgins, who plays owner of like a Japanese themed restaurant, and he has this we see him at several points in the film, and he has like a different Japanese wife for each scene. But he considers himself an absolute connoisseur of Japanese culture, and he's like really patronizing and racist to his wives without having any awareness of why that is. And it strikes me that the editorial comment in those scenes comes when Anderson gives you a close-up of his first wife wincing as she listens to some of the Orientalist ad copy. It comes in the fact that Gary, who otherwise is just a background character in that first scene with Higgins, like it ends with him trying not to laugh at what a jackass this guy is being. And I think there are some objections to that scene that I think would be like understandable. I could understand if Asian viewers said, look, I don't want to hear someone do a comedy Japanesey voice. It takes me back to being bullied at school. That's fine. But that's not the objection I'm seeing. The objection I'm seeing is like, I can't believe Paul Thomas Anderson thinks racism is good and okay, actually. And it's like, come on, man, can you just not read a fucking scene? Can you not understand visual storytelling on any level?
Well, that's inevitably just going to be a side effect of the internet, the discourse with capital D. That's just as it is. I think the thing editorially that goes to it in that scene is that in a not very short space of time, the wife has got fed up with him and left him, and he's gone and married someone else who's only just getting used to how terrible he is. And of course, there is a punchline to the terrible way that he goes on, and it all feeds into the theme of the film. Most of these characters are faking it till they make it.
Yeah.
It's about the artificiality of the business that they're in. And it's in there, and yes, if you cut it out, then it wouldn't change the plot much. But as I said, hangout movie. It's in there. It's like I completely get the perspective from where, as you said, like it's not the objection that seems to be being raised as much that it's offensive. It's just that this doesn't serve the story. But enough of that. Enough of those people. Yeah, I mean, that's in there from the very top. That theme of like fake it till you make it. It's the thing that Alana's doing all the way through. It's the thing that Cooper Hoffman, with this incredible confidence, brings across. But like for the whole of that early passage of the film, to me, is like it's just this weird. The thing, one of the big laughs in the film to me is when he goes to that audition where Maya Rudolph is one of the casting people. And the guy who's sort of like hyping him up between takes is kind of like, you've still got it. It's like, he is 15. He is a 15-year-old being told, because he's a child star, you've still got it. It's the weird sort of spectacle that's just funny in itself of him preparing for an audition in like a waiting room full of 9-year-olds, to where this 15-year-old kid can already be past it because of the nature of the business that he's in.
Yes.
And so then the rest, it kind of grows out of that into the sort of like the side hustles that come up throughout the rest of the film, that are partly kind of him trying to impress upon Alana that he's grown up. Where all she's really doing by hanging out with him is trying to be a kid again. It's that backwards and forwards motion all the way through the film of like him trying to fake being grown up, and all the grown ups trying to fake being kids.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it was interesting. I read the interview with Anderson in The Guardian just before this came out, and he was asked about that dynamic and why the age gap, which again some people have found very troubling, is important to the theme. And the interviewer put it to him that what you're looking at is really two styles of parenting, that Gary has grown up too fast. He's always been on film sets. He's always been around adults. We see his mum in a very brief scene, but we never see his dad. And indeed, his parents seem to just let him wander around and do everything. But then you have Alana, who lives with her family, and she's in her mid-20s, and her family are very protective and vet everyone who she brings back home, and she's like mocked by her sisters. And the interviewer said, is it not the case that this is a clash between two different styles or even two different eras of parenting? But what was interesting to me about that is that Anderson's response was absolutely vehemently that he thinks kids are just not given the chance to have a childhood these days, that we are too frightened to just let them wander and get in trouble and do their own thing. And he really ranted about that. And it's not that I think he's wrong, but I just think it's interesting, and it's a mark of what a good and humane director he is, that when you watch the film, you wouldn't necessarily think this is a guy who wants to have a rant about how modern parenting is too hands-on. You couldn't really get his position on that issue from the film, because I think he fundamentally likes to give every character their chance to speak and their chance to be understood.
Yeah, it has all of that. Like, that's all valuable, like, background to it. Yeah, exactly. I do love that. I mean, all of Haim are in this. I was going to say a lot of Haim's family are in this. It's just Haim and their parents.
Well, there's a scene where they're having a meal and they sing a Jewish prayer before lunch, and I just thought, oh shit, the new Haim single's dropped.
No. There's I love the way the family's introduced her when she's coming back from either the first or second meeting with Gary.
Yeah.
And it's that long shot from the driveway, like the shouting match with her dad. Who
Mm,
I didn't, as I said, I didn't know until the end of the film that it was her actual dad, that the family are all playing the family.
yeah.
Loved them in it because there's so much funny stuff in there. As you mentioned, that disastrous date where she kind of like she goes with Gary to this thing that like his confidence in saying, "Will you chaperone me to this gig?" In
Yeah.
a way that he thinks will make him seem more adult because he's got this job. And the gig is that he's pillow fighting with a bunch of other younger children.
Yeah, he's
And
at a
there's him and
he's at a reunion for a kind of cheaper
yeah,
by the dozen style movie that he was in as a child actor. And yeah, as you say, he's basically being beaten by the load of kids with pillows and trying to sneak innuendos past his very angry adult co-star.
yeah. It's the Yeah, it's the thing of like from that meeting. She has that thing where she's sort of pointlessly telling people I'm a chaperone, like I'm
Mm,
a chaperone, like part to clarify, part to impress. It's like as if anyone she's telling is going to be impressed. But from that she winds up taking home another one of the older lads.
mm.
From that thing, played by Skylar Gisondo, who I've seen in a few films, and
Oh,
has
okay.
that kind of same man's head thing that Cooper Hoffman is trying to say in this. But the thing of that scene, of that family scene, is that they have that sort of awkward scene at the dinner table where the young man tells them, "Oh, I'm an atheist. I'm not Jewish," and they sort of storm outside. And apparently, as scripted, there was a different sort of angle to this. She was just fully mortified.
Mm.
To which Alana Haim apparently said, no, this will be different, and improvised the line, "What does your penis look like?"
Yes.
So everything that comes out with that, like I love everything that comes, like all of that scene is improvised, but then the thing when she runs back in and she's slagging off her sisters, going, "You're always looking at me. You always think things, you thinker." It's just
Yeah.
incredible. It's just an incredible insult, but she is phenomenal in this. She's really, really good. It's like an
She,
incredible. Do you know much of the history of like Anderson and the band?
because I was just reading a Little White Lies interview with Anderson and Alana Haim, and he said that part of the film came from when he did some music videos for them. He went through a phase of doing music videos for all his favorite bands. He did some for Radiohead, he did some for Haim, and he said, "Well, we didn't have any money, so I thought, all right, we'll just walk and run everywhere." That's a quick and easy way to make things cinematic. And it turns out that Alana Haim is a pretty good runner. But yeah, the other thing, which I think is what you were probably going to get to, is that was it the mother of the Haim family taught Paul Thomas Anderson art at school?
Yeah, she was his first grade art teacher, and they had no idea of this when he got into the band and started talking to the band. And they knew because the mum apparently has said, like I'm why he's artistic, because I was his first grade art teacher. Which is incredible. The thing that I read was an interview between it was John C. Reilly, who's another frequent collaborator of Anderson, interviewing Alana Haim, and he sort of says, like, for the readers who are wondering how Paul Thomas Anderson got that gig directing music videos for Haim, he knows their mom. He knows their mom. That's how he got that gig.
But it's funny
It's
that when I was like looking at the cast list when this was announced before it became a big thing, I was thinking, oh, there's quite a lot of nepotism in this film, isn't there? But of course, it's natural for the film, and it's not like it's something Anderson makes a habit of. But he said, I found making Phantom Thread very difficult. I'm in a different country. It's quite a dark story. Daniel Day-Lewis was having trouble with it. And I just wanted to do something that was like a friends and family project. And there are some wonderful cameos in here. There's a cameo as a waterbed salesman from George DiCaprio, who, as we know, is one of America's leading collectors of the work of the symbolist sculptor Stanislav Solavsky, and also his
of
kid's been
course.
in some movies, I think.
Yeah. Did you spot the John C. Reilly cameo?
Yes, I did.
It's just one of those things where you just pick out. It's almost like an audio. He is in shot, but you
Yeah.
only know it because of his voice. He plays Fred Gwynn at a convention stand for the Munsters.
Yes, he is in full Herman Munster makeup. It's beautiful.
It's very nicely done. On top of that, you've got Cooper Hoffman, who is the son of the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is the other great discovery in this film. But since this film came along, there's inevitably been much to the dismay of film Twitter, someone went and found like a screen cap from the 2013 Oscars telecast where it's like sort of the best supporting actress thing, and Amy Adams is there, and Philip Seymour Hoffman is sat behind with a tiny Cooper Hoffman from 10 years ago, and all of a sudden every minute of the last 10 years just hits you and you realize this is the same kid. This is the same kid who's in that shot. It's like, bloody hell. But yeah, the family and friends thing definitely comes across, not least with casting all of Haim in it. And I've watched some of the music videos that he did for the band as well before this. Some of them kind of just before he got going on Licorice Pizza. Some of them a little for their previous album. It does in a way feel like a run, like a sort of dry run for this almost. There is running. There's going through the streets, as you said. There's plenty of that in there. But when it comes to the film, the family dynamic in it is spectacular, and not knowing until the end credits that they were actual family. Obviously, I knew the sisters were, but didn't know the parents were as well. But it's like it's as much a lead off into what follows as as you sort of like as Gary's early sort of audition tribulations, and then it comes to the waterbed business.
I was not expecting this film to have so much information about waterbed sales in early 70s California. It's a bit like the Hudsucker Proxy, isn't it? It's the secret history of a completely stupid and pointless invention.
Yeah, well, from the trailer, like looking up what Licorice Pizza means, it's like slang for a vinyl record. And looking at the trailer, I thought it was maybe going to be based around a record store or something. It's about an entirely different type of vinyl.
Yes.
In the 70s. I mean, apparently the working title for this, it's one of them things where in the online news cycle now, I remember the first rumblings of this being Paul Thomas Anderson filming mystery new projects with Bradley Cooper, Alana Haim, an unknown actor. That's little baby Cooper Hoffman. You respect his name. Anyway, apparently the working title of the film then was Soggy Bottom.
Yes.
Which is, more apt maybe, but for various reasons unusable. As Alana says in the film, it sounds like someone shit his pants.
It made me think that maybe Paul Thomas Anderson is finally getting around to filming his stash of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou fan fiction.
It's so it kind of leads off into this sort of segue about the waterbeds business that they have, and this is because apparently a lot of the film was inspired by Anderson's friend Gary Gutzman, who's a movie producer now, but was a child star, who, from the sounds of it, basically went through the same sort of post-child star career as Gary Valentine did. He had a waterbed company. He delivered a waterbed to John Peters. He later had a pinball store. But I'm just going to stumble over this John Peters thing for now. I'm going to come back to this because John Peters in this film, Graham. The movie producer John Peters has played.
Let me just set this up, because Goatsman's precise, like the thing that he said that inspired Anderson to put Peters in the film is that he told Anderson, I delivered like furniture to John Peters' house once, and Anderson thought, anyone who's lived in LA for any length of time, their ears prick up when you say this. Oh wow, what's your crazy John Peters story? And he said, actually wasn't one. He just behaved quite normally. So Anderson felt that as it is, that was an imbalance in the fabric of the universe, and has given him the craziest John Peters story in this movie.
Yeah, it's like apparently like the real thing was just like he was just a nice guy and said, "Oh yeah, go in, guys. I'm going to the movies. Take your time." So however, in this film, well, important background. Anderson did secure John Peters' permission to caricature in this film on one condition, apparently, which is that he wanted him to include a chat-up line that John Peters always uses in real life, which is sure enough.
What is it? Which one?
It's the line at his very last appearance in the film when he says, "Do you want a peanut butter sandwich?" which is apparently a line that works for him. And that was his condition to being in this movie. However, in being given license to caricature, the actor who got to play him was Bradley Cooper, who has just spent a fair amount of time over the last decade trying to make A Star Is Born, on which John Peters is a producer and stakeholder. And Bradley Cooper plays John Peters with the affection you reserve for a mortal enemy. He's sort of like, you'd best align him in like an Anderson's filmography. You'd best compare him to like Alfred Molina in Boogie Nights, maybe.
Yes.
But he's sort of like the shark from Jaws, to use an anachronism, because it wasn't out at the time that the film is set. But it has that sort of the mania, all the stuff that Kevin Smith stories about making a Superman film, all of this stuff, like, because Bradley Cooper has just come off working with him, and when asked about working with John Peters on A Star Is Born and how he was able to get A Star Is Born made, he simply answered, John wasn't there. Which goes to show the difficulty they had getting this film made with him as such a major stakeholder.
You've briefly mentioned the Kevin Smith stories. I feel like we need to add some context of who John Peters is for the benefit of listeners who might not be aware of this, because he is a behind-the-scenes figure in Hollywood. He's someone who people might not be familiar with, but when you read about him, you do think, how have you stayed behind the scenes? How is there an ego this big that is happy not being on camera?
Yeah, he's sort of in name-only credits on Batman and Superman films since the Tim Burton 1989 one. We're even on the set of that film. It's kind of maybe you're not allowed on set anymore. So basically, he's as detailed in the film, he was Barbara Streisand's boyfriend, who got into film producing that way, and just as sort of linking around, like, so for the background for the Kevin Smith thing is that Kevin Smith was tapped to write a Superman film. There's this incredible YouTube video where he goes into a sort of speaking engagement where he went into all of his interactions with this mad producer who said he can't wear the cape, he can't fly, he has to fight a giant spider at the end. Just this legendary figure who's become a pariah in Hollywood. So when it came to the making of A Star Is Born, in which he would have been a producer, Warner Brothers basically got the film made by figuring out a way to leave him off the credits, including all the for your consideration Oscars stuff. But Bradley Cooper as director of this thing, had to wrangle with him for a while, and like, so it can't feel like anything but cathartic that he's playing him as this maniac. This film.
Yes,
he has the thing I want to. As I said, if you haven't seen the YouTube thing, Kevin Smith, like, go and look it up. But there's a line in that way he says, you know how I know we're going to make a great Superman movie, you and I, Kevin, because we're from the streets. And he has that line in this film, and I sort of want to stand up and cheer like it was a big fan service catchphrase. You and me were from the streets. So he's evidently said this to a lot of people. But then but you know, other lines include, that's my nozzle, motherfucker. You know, like, all this shit.
I think if you love outrageous behind the scenes Hollywood stories, that we're from the streets moment is like Harrison Ford saying, Chewie, we're home in The Force Awakens, what you've lived for all these years. I love the Kevin Smith stories. My other favourite John Peters story is one a lot of people don't know, when Paul Schrader was doing a lot of writer-for-hire work in the 90s before he did Affliction, and that kind of revived his directorial career. But he ended up in Peters' orbit, and Peters said, Paul, I've got a pitch for you. Gotti, the John Gotti story. And of course, that's a great idea for a movie, as John Travolta will attest. But he said, yeah, I've bought a book. I've got the rights to it. We can make it today. And he gave Schrader it, and it was like a book by one of the FBI agents who'd caught Gotti. And it was just a load of details of wiretaps and sting operations and trying to get permits to do raids and things like that. And Schrader actually wrote this, and Peters just hit the roof. He thought, this could have been the next Godfather, and you've made it this boring, like, federal procedural thing. He just never read anything that he bought the rights to.
Yeah. It's, I mean, as I say, with good reason. There's like, Christopher Nolan wouldn't put up with him on the set of those Dark Knight films either. He's, with good reason, I think, a pariah at this point as far as the Hollywood studio scene is concerned. But he, as I said, weaving through the end of this, even without the inside baseball stuff, Bradley Cooper is really good in this. He's really, really funny.
He is good in this, and we should mention some of those star cameos, because Anderson said, they're not purposeless cameos. He said anytime you think that the narrative needs a bit of a jolt, or there isn't really a way for the characters to progress, I just put a movie star in and it gives it a different kind of energy for a bit. But there's some great ones. There's one which ties into the reason why we are here today. There is a great Tom Waits appearance in this film where he gets an entrance as like a disembodied, gravelly voice from the back of a restaurant, and he walks on camera with this halo of cigarette smoke around his head. And I just saw it and I thought, this is why I do pop screen. This is like the ultimate pop screen moment. I love this.
It's an incredible. It's as if he's just sort of materialized from the smoke itself. Before that was just voice, and now has form. But yeah, he's absolutely incredible. He plays a director, and Sean Penn plays the actor who he made a war film with many years before. And it's another one of those things that goes to the trying to recapture youth on the adult end of things.
How I don't want to say this cruelly, because I do still have a lot of time for Sean Penn as an actor, and I think he's very good in this. But how in on the joke do you think Sean Penn is here?
Not at all. Sean Penn does not get the joke. Look, I'm very here for slacking off Sean Penn. I have no patience for it to the point where I forgot he was in this until he was in it, and then didn't mind him. So that's, I think, the sign of a good film, because he does wind me up. But I don't think he's in on the joke.
Well, he's been going around promoting this film that he directed with his daughter in, and every interview he does, I just think, you are Jack Holden. You are your character in Licorice Pizza. Every single thing he has said on the Flag Day press tour could be a quote from his character in this movie.
Yeah, it's big. I mean, in this, there's a more daring cinematic stunt, but it is big. Sort of like, do you think I could jump over that bin? And he jumps over something else in this on a motorbike, which is just a lovely scene. That whole Tom Waits is fantastic in it as well. But again, it's like you could argue, like again, the two main characters are still central in that. In that case, it's in a restaurant and they're sat at different tables, and there's the energy of her turning up with this older man, and who's not really, even her interactions with him provides a counterpoint to whatever it is she's got going with this, this kid, this kindred spirit that she's found in it does all serve to, especially the way that scene ends. It's another one of those scenes with that magnetic pull. It's like his answer to the earlier on one, where she runs to him when he's in trouble, he runs to her. It all syncs up beautifully.
No, it absolutely does. I just want to talk about that central relationship for a bit, largely because I'm interested in getting you cancelled. No, that's not it at all. But it has freaked some people out that, this is a film where a 15-year-old boy has a crush on a 25-year-old woman, and the 25-year-old woman, though she is repelled by him for a bit, is eventually kind of, I've had worse prospects. What do you think Alana's motivations in this are? What do you think she sees in Gary?
I think there's an aspect. I mean, first of all, I think that, like, I understand completely why there's been concerns that it's akin to grooming, and that if the genders of the main characters were reversed, everyone would have a problem with this. I think that the film knows this. I don't think the representation is endorsement. It's the same way as John Michael Higgins' character being a terrible racist and doing a fake Japanese accent is not being endorsed. I do think that it's in the. I think that the film gives you a frame of reference early on. As I say, you've got Gary in a room full of 9-year-olds auditioning to where he's already passed it. Like, to where in this industry that they're in, the age gap, it might as well be Harold and Maude. And I think that the other thing, and I think that alongside that, compared to Anderson's other films, especially, and I use the word advisedly because I don't mean in an Amy Adams going to the memorial as well, a whole Nick Cave song plays kind of way, but it is, compared to his other films, sexless. It's not. It's as I say, sexless with an asterisk. It does broach these topics.
It's not
but it
Boogie
owns it.
Nights.
It's
I
not.
think we can say that with safety.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's definitely, yeah, it's certainly not Boogie Nights. No, on a scale of Boogie Nights, it's the opposite. Yeah, I think that I get completely where some people haven't born to it for this exact reason, but I don't think it's problematic. I think that it gets where, I mean, on one hand, people say it's a 10-year age gap. One of the improvisations that's in the film is that Alana says she's 28, then corrects herself 25. Now, behind the scenes, it's because Bradley Cooper is Bradley Cooper in her face. This was her second day of filming, and she just said her own age and then corrected herself. So it's just an improvised thing. But Anderson since said, yeah, it's in there. I think she's 28 in line about her age because I think she is where she stands in that film is that she's unmoored, she's in her 20s, whether it's mid-20s or late 20s, and doesn't know where she's going. Like, what these two have together, it's not about, I mean, obviously from his end, he's projecting that confidence, and he's like, I could get an older girlfriend if I want to in this kind of thing. But he is immature. She is, I think, trying to head back towards childhood in a way. I don't think there's anything predatory in it. She has her boundaries from the very beginning that she outlines, and that he in his confidence is still going up against. And it's not, yeah, I know that over the course of the film it grows to, again, it comes to what I said about the ending feeling, and it's about the depth, it's about the length and like the depth of this relationship and friendship between them gets you to that point that you're at the end. And I know it sounds like a lot of equivocation. It's like, absolutely understand where anyone else is coming from if they found it more upsetting.
I think that ending is interesting. It's one of the few bits in the film that I'm not quite sure about, and I wonder if, again, something to do with the cinematic grammar of it, the running, the voiceover, the cut to black, just makes it feel like a rom-com when that isn't the film that Anderson is making. I think for all that it is a very funny film, we are meant to see something quite tragic in these characters, that he's convinced that he's an adult already, but his claim to adulthood is based on like a fading acting career and a waterbed sales sort of thing. So he is going to get the wind knocked out of him pretty soon. And she is someone who just can find no place in the adult world and is worried that she's missed a calling. You know, it goes back to that thing you were saying earlier, that their imagined ages meet in the middle, the ages they want to be. And I think that is ultimately a very sad thing. I think that it's not entirely strange that people think that a drama about a relationship is meant to depict a good relationship, that unless it's something, you know, like Nil by Mouth or something where it's very obviously meant to be abusive and horrible. But I think you can like these characters and root for these characters and still think, Jesus, in years to come, they are going to regret this so much.
Yeah, it's not really. This is why I think there isn't going to be a Phantom Thread 2. But but crucially, like, I think this is, again, just by comparing and contrasting those other films, I think that film has a more unambiguously romantic ending than this does. As you say, there's a tragic element to all of this that's foregrounded all the way through. Like the scene with I love the scene with Harriet Sansom Harris, who's the agent.
I love her.
It's almost claustrophobic, like, on her, and then but it's Alana just going, yep, to anything. Like, can you ride a horse? Yep. Can you speak languages? Spanish? Yeah.
Now, Harriet Sansom Harris was one of the standouts from Phantom Thread to me. Like, as good as Daniel Day-Lewis and Leslie Manville and Vicky Krieps are in that movie, there was a part of me that was coming out thinking, who plays that American woman? She is incredible. And you're right, she's great in this as well.
Graham, I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that I only just discovered that it was her when I was researching for this, even though I've watched Phantom Thread a few times and thought she was brilliant. Didn't know that was her. Clocked her immediately in this because she's an agent again. So it's like sort of thinking of Frasier, where she's BB in Frasier.
She is, isn't she?
Well, there you go. She's a chameleon, is what we learned.
We both had our penny drop moment now.
Well, there we are. We're learning a lot about Harriet Sansom Harris in this
this
podcast. Yeah, just to the point of as I say, I think it's within a filmography. The reason why I'm coming to it from that angle is because I think there's a little bit of everything he's ever done in this. Like, it's sort of set between Inherent Vice and Boogie Nights. It's got that sort of, the same as with William H. Macy and Magnolia, it's got that child star anxiety, but, you know, from the end of a much younger actor.
Yeah.
You know, it's got that same jagged romantic, or, you know, platonic and romantic interplay of Phantom Thread. Like There Will Be Blood, there's a bit of hassle about oil at one point.
Yes.
In the lyric. And it's even got Philip Seymour Hoffman's son going into like Punch Drunk Love's family business of mattress salesman. Like, it's all in there. And then, just for good measure, you've got John C. Reilly as Herman Munster. So, you know, there's a little bit of all of Anderson's filmography in this, and, you know, you can definitely see after Phantom Thread, he's kind of returned to home territory and making a friends and family film as this. But I think that's what makes it such a good counter to something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think so. And there is that kind of trend of this happening. I mean, you could throw Roma by Alfonso Cuarón into it as well. That seems to be the thing that you do when you've earned your spurs as a serious director, is you do this very immersive recreation of the world of your childhood. And what I think is particularly interesting about this is that it's not a purely innocent recreation of the 70s. You get Anderson's love for the 70s, not least on the soundtrack. But, you know, as you say, it unfolds against the backdrop of the OPEC crisis. You know, you see Richard Nixon on television, and there's lots of little grace notes as well, which I guess feeds back into what I was saying about the central relationship, where you know, without the film making heavy weather about it, but you know that Alana has been sexually harassed at a lot of their jobs. You know, she talks to a friend of hers and they joke about one guy they worked for called the handyman, because he used to ask all his female employees for hand jobs. And you think, yeah, I can sort of see why, having taken your first step out of this stifling household and gone into this world, you immediately just think, fuck it, I'm going back to childhood.
Yeah. I mean, there's an immediate again, same as her holding a mirror up to him. There's an immediate contrast right at the start of the film where he's given her the ridiculous overconfident patter. That's like, you know, he says things like, "There's too much reality in pictures now, and I've always been a song and dance man." He is 15. I can't. She says, but it's the immediate contrast with the latchy photographer slapping her on the arse.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of. It's sad and it's ridiculous that she's getting this interest in her as a person from a 15-year-old, and all the other men in her life, whether it's Sean Penn or whoever else, are predatory. But yeah, it's as you say, it's not. It kind of doesn't glamorize the 70s, I would say.
Yeah, it's not pure 70s nostalgia.
Yeah, it's not. I think that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a more romantic film than this is.
Yeah.
In the most, you know, all of the most literal ways where it changes history at the end. This is not sugarcoated, I would say.
I suppose out of the three films we've mentioned in this trend, this is right at the middle. It is more romantic than Roma, if only because, you know, there isn't a fucking massacre at the end. But it is definitely not as starry-eyed as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is about the 60s.
Yeah. I know we're recording this before the Oscar nominations, by the way, but while we're talking about the trend of Romas, like Belfast is pretty much going to do what Roma should have done, isn't it, really? Think about it. Because it wasn't made by Netflix, so it's probably going. I haven't seen it yet. It might be great. I'm looking forward to seeing it. But
I have not seen it.
If we're going to prognosticate, if we're going to prognosticate about the Oscars, that's it, really.
Yeah. No, I'm still kind of catching up with some of the other Oscar stuff. I saw The Power of the Dog last night. I've seen West Side Story. And I think those are the only films. It's not been a well-stocked Oscar cabinet this year, but yeah, I've seen what I want to see mostly.
Yeah, it's quite late to be asking, by the way. But did you see Licorice Pizza on 35mm or digital?
I saw it on digital. I would have liked to see it on 35mm, but it's quite hard for me to get up to Newcastle to our nearest art house cinema, and when I do it, I want to see something like Memoria, which I believe distribution is limited because the print self-destructs after each time it's played. I might be making that up. It's something like that.
Yeah, there's some good hype for that. I didn't deliberately go see a 35mm, but it is one of those ones I think benefits in the same way as something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood did.
Yeah,
Again, didn't see it on purpose on film, but it worked out nicely. It's one of these things where the purity of you've got to shoot on film. It's like I think now the bar for me is like, okay, have you got a really good reason for it though? Like it's a
yeah, yeah.
period set film where it looks absolutely at home. And it did. So just throwing that in as I mentioned at the end, just because we're doing a two white guys podcast and we haven't mentioned whether we saw it on 35mm film or digital all the way through. How will
Yes.
people know we know of what we speak?
No, that's very true. I think the one thread we've left unpulled that I want to, I suppose I don't have much to say about it, but I think it needs to be mentioned is Haim's music. Obviously, Paul Thomas Anderson's a fan. What about yourself?
Yeah, but bits and bobs for me. Like I've gone back and listened to a lot of. There's some stuff that I'd heard and not realized was them. Like
Yeah, same
and
here.
when I've gone back over and listened to the newer stuff, like this, when I was watching the videos, obviously heard as well. Yeah, generally enjoy them. Maybe the thing that I remembered the most for on screen with them having a better time than any of us were watching it at the 2021 Brit Awards. That was nice. They won best international group, which is one of these things the Brits flings in there. I
Yeah.
guess to draw a bigger guest list. You know, in between Jack Whitehall realizing that he can afford not to work and he hasn't enjoyed being dragged back out of mothballs after a year in lockdown and just reading terrible gags off an auto cue. It was nice to see Haim having a lovely time getting blasted. I was getting blasted as well. Felt like we were all on the same team.
Yeah, it's funny. I think for me, it's like a reflection of the way that my musical tastes have changed so much over the past few years, which is a key reason why I started this podcast. I want to investigate that more. I used to dislike them because I thought they sounded too mainstream, and then I avoided them because I thought they didn't sound mainstream enough for my new, insanely sunny poptimist tastes. But I do keep hearing bits of their work on the radio and thinking, that's good. And you're not listening to this because you are a stupid dickhead. But I greatly enjoy the song that they did with Taylor Swift on Evermore. And I think if you could travel back to like 2012, if you could go back 10 years and tell a younger Graham that one of his favorite songs of the year would be a Taylor Swift murder ballad with Haim as the backing band, I would think I'd probably disbelieve you as soon as you said I came from the future, but as soon as you got to that bit, I'd be very sure you were lying.
I was going to say we all have these weird things. Like if I could talk to myself 10 years ago, and you don't tell you anything important from the last 10 years, it's always something like this. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh, all
leave
right, cool.
Brexit as
Must
a
be an uneventful.
surprise, but
The things we leave as surprises. No, in terms of what I've got like on regular rotation. I have like stuff like Falling and The Wire, like tracks that I like to go back to. I'm thinking when I add the steps that after watching the Anderson video for it earlier on to one of the newer ones. But yeah, I'm big fan of Haim.
yeah, I'm really enthusiastic to go back through their back catalogue and see what I've missed now because yeah, I do like those songs I've heard. I think The Wire was definitely one of them. And like you say, Alana is just so charming in this. And apparently, part of the reason why Cooper Hoffman is in it is because Anderson screen tested her across alongside a lot of other like professional child stars who've been doing this for as long as Gabby had.
Yeah.
And she said she just makes them all look like they're doing theatre acting. You know, she's so natural that she makes everyone else look like a ham.
Yeah, there's a nice sort of untrained aspect to their
Hmm.
acting, and it's like yeah, I've seen Anderson say that when he was writing the script, it was only about halfway through that having known and met Cooper Hoffman that he was kind of like popped into his head of like, oh, maybe he should play him, and then
Hmm.
tried to dismiss it, but just sort of landed back upon it really. So and it works. So it's like two incredible. Like when you look at some of the previous films he's made, he's had like Joaquin Phoenix headline, he's had Daniel Day Lewis headline, and it's nice to have two breakout stars at the front of
Yeah,
this. I think. Yeah.
There is one thing that I read in that little White Lies interview, which I thought was just perfect for this podcast, and maybe we'll close on it. But he was asked about 70s music, and he said, yeah, it's not just nostalgic for me, because people who weren't around in that time recognize that this is like an insanely deep bucket of great music that is almost inexhaustible that was released that decade. It's not like nobody ever thinks, Joni Mitchell, how did you get into that? And he said, and I remember this quote distinctly, it's not like you're asking, how did you get into Square Pusher or something? And I thought, Paul, if you're listening, come on, Pop Screen. That is the exact Pop Screen way of making that observation.
Beautifully put.
Well, if you enjoyed that, you can donate to our Patreon and get a bonus episode every month. Our last one on the Oscar has just gone out, and we also give you exclusive access to our other movie podcast, Directors Uncut, and my Doctor Who reviews twice a week. But until then, that's been your lot from Pop Screen from another week. I've been Graham.
I've been Mark.
And we'll see you next week.